The crystal glasses clinked as patrons dined at the Silver Oak. Then a loud crash. A middle-aged man collapsed between tables, gasping. The restaurant manager rushed over, shoving aside the elderly janitor who approached. "Get back to your mop, Mike. This isn't your concern." The Silver Oak stood as Westfield's premier dining establishment, where Connecticut's affluent gather for exquisite five-course meals and business deals over $200 bottles of wine. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the mahogany tables, and staff in pressed uniforms moved with practiced precision between well-dressed patrons. It was a kind of place where reservations were made weeks in advance, and impropriety was not tolerated. Mike Wilson had worked as the restaurant's janitor for 3 years, his weather hands and slight limp hinting at a harder past. At 54, his salt and pepper hair was kept military short, his posture still straight despite the hours spent mopping floors and hauling trash. Most patrons looked through him rather than at him, their eyes sliding past the man in the gray maintenance uniform as if he were part of the furniture. Even the staff rarely engaged in beyond necessary instructions. Tonight, Mike had been quietly fixing a bathroom door hinge when the commotion erupted in the main dining room. He'd slipped his tools into his pocket and moved toward the sound with a quiet efficiency that no one in the restaurant had ever had reason to notice before. His face remained calm, but his eyes assessed the situation with unexpected intensity. Robert Collins, a 65-year-old financial executive and Silver Oak regular, lay sprawled on the ornate carpet, his dinner companion frantically calling his name. His face had turned an alarming shade of gray, his breathing labored and irregular. The restaurant's manager, Greg Townsend, rushed over, his typical composure cracking as he loosened Collins' tie and instructed a server to call 911. "Does anyone have medical training?" Greg called out, scanning the room of shocked faces. Mike stepped forward quietly. "I can help until the ambulance arrives." Greg's eyes narrowed as he registered the janitor's presence. "Mr. Wilson, please return to your duties. This is a medical emergency." "I know, sir. I have training for this," Mike persisted, his voice steady. Greg's laugh was short and dismissive. "We need actual medical professionals, not maintenance staff. Please keep the area clear for when paramedics arrive." A server rushed back, phone in hand. "They're sending an ambulance, but there's a pileup on I-95. They said at least 15 minutes. Collins' companion grew hysterical. "He can't wait 15 minutes. Do something." Greg knelt awkwardly beside Collins, whose breathing was becoming more erratic. He tried remembering a CPR course from years ago, positioning his hands uncertainly on the man's chest. "Sir," Mike said more firmly, "you're not positioning your hands correctly. Please let me help." "Return to your station, Wilson," Greg hissed through clenched teeth. "This isn't a bathroom mess to clean up." Other staff members exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Maybe we should let him try," whispered a young waitress. "Not a chance," replied the maitre d'. "Greg would fire us all. Besides, what would a janitor know? He'd probably just want attention." Mike stood rigid, watching Collins' condition deteriorate. In his mind, he wasn't in a pristine Connecticut restaurant, but back in the dust of Hellman Province, where he knelt beside wounded Marines as explosions rocked the ground. He remembered the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that seconds meant lives. He'd treated shrapnel wounds, applied tourniquets, and performed emergency tracheotomies with minimal equipment. Yet here, surrounded by luxury, he was deemed unworthy to help. "Someone find a defibrillator," Greg shouted, panic rising in his voice. "It's in the office somewhere." "It won't help with what he's experiencing," Mike said. "He needs CPR properly administered now, and possibly an airway cleared." Greg stood up, physically placing himself between Mike and Collins. "Listen, I don't know what janitor academy you graduated from, but I'm handling this. Go back to your mop before I call security." "My cleaning skills aren't relevant right now," Mike replied, his patience thinning. "I've had medical training." Greg sneered. "What? First aid from a community college? Or did you learn medicine while scrubbing toilets?" Collins suddenly went completely still, his labored breathing stopping entirely. His dinner companion shrieked, and the restaurant fell into horrified silence. "He's not breathing," someone shouted. Greg froze, his hands hovering uselessly. The staff looked at each other in panic. The sound of distant sirens offered no immediate hope. Mike looked at the dying man on the floor, at the manager who stood between them, and at the room full of people who had never truly seen him until this moment. He had been invisible to them by choice and circumstance. But some choices couldn't be made based on comfort or appearances. Some were simply about duty. Step aside, Mike said, his voice transformed. The quiet deference vanished, replaced by a tone of command that seemed to physically straighten his frame. I'm a former Navy Corpsman with the Marine Corps. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. That man will die if we wait. Greg's mouth opened to object, but a man in an expensive suit stepped forward. I'm an attorney, and if you prevent someone with medical training from helping, the liability will be catastrophic. Let him through now. Greg hesitated, then stepped back, his expression a mixture of shock and resentment. Mike moved with surprising agility for a man who had seemed so unremarkable minutes before. He knelt beside Collins, checked for a pulse, and immediately began textbook CPR compressions. His movements were precise and confident, counting audibly with each compression. Someone time this, he ordered. I need to know when I've hit the 2-minute mark. He glanced up, making eye contact with the maitre d'. Find me the first aid kit and the AED if you have one. The restaurant staff, moments ago dismissive, now scrambled to follow his instructions. Mike continued CPR, his technique clearly professional. Adjusting, Collins had to maintain an open airway between compressions. The dining room had transformed. Patrons stood in a wide circle, many with phones recording the scene. Their expressions shifted from horror to hope as they watched the janitor work with clinical precision. Greg stood frozen at the perimeter. His earlier confidence evaporated. His face flushed with shame as he watched Mike seamlessly transition from compressions to rescue breaths with practiced efficiency. I don't understand, whispered the server to the hostess. He's just a janitor. Apparently he's not just anything, she replied, passing Mike the restaurant's first aid kit without being asked, watching as he expertly assessed its contents without pausing his rhythm. For minutes after Mike began CPR, Collins gasped and began to breathe weakly on his own. The paramedics burst through the restaurant doors moments later, equipment in hand. What have we got? The lead EMT asked, kneeling beside Mike. Male, mid-60s, sudden collapse, presented with symptoms consistent with cardiac arrest. No breathing or pulse when I started CPR approximately 4 minutes ago. Regained spontaneous respiration about 30 seconds ago. No AED was applied. The paramedic gave Mike a quick, appraising look. Military. Navy Corpsman, 1st Marine Division. The EMT nodded with immediate respect. Good work, document. We'll take it from here. The paramedics efficiently transferred Collins to a gurney, attached monitoring equipment, and prepared for transport. One of them turned to Mike. You probably saved his life. Without immediate CPR, his chances would have been minimal. Mike simply nodded and stepped back, retrieving a cleaning rag from his pocket to wipe Collins' sweat from his hands. He began straightening the area where the table had been overturned in the commotion. Greg approached hesitantly, his earlier authority deflated. Mike, I didn't know. Most people don't, Mike replied simply, continuing to clean. The restaurant owner, Mr. Vaughn, who had been alerted by phone, arrived just as the ambulance departed. After a brief conversation with Greg, whose face grew increasingly pale, he approached Mike. Mr. Wilson, I owe you an apology on behalf of the Silver Oak. Your actions tonight were extraordinary. Several patrons had gathered nearby. A distinguished-looking woman stepped forward. I'm Catherine Bellows, director of the Veteran Support Alliance of Connecticut. We've been trying to highlight the untapped skills veterans bring to civilian jobs. Would you be willing to speak with me? Before Mike could respond, another man approached. Colonel James Harrington, retired, Marine Corps. He extended his hand to Mike. It's an honor to shake the hand of a corpsman. You never stop serving, do you, Doc? The restaurant, which had moments ago viewed him as invisible, now focused entirely on Mike. Servers who had never bothered learning his name approached with expressions of awkward respect. Patrons stood to applaud as the realization of what had happened spread through the dining room. "I just did what I was trained to do," Mike said, uncomfortable with the attention. In the Corps, we had a saying, "Corpsman up." It meant drop everything and help. The training never leaves you. He paused. Coming home was harder than staying there sometimes. Finding my place again. Mr. Vaughn placed a hand on Mike's shoulder. "You have a place here, Mike, but perhaps not as a janitor. We need to talk about your future at the Silver Oak." Greg stood at the periphery, watching the scene unfold, the harsh lesson in judgment and respect written clearly across his face. 3 weeks later, Mike stood in the newly created position of Safety and Facilities Director at the Silver Oak, supervising both maintenance and staff safety training. He wore a blazer now instead of the gray maintenance uniform, though he still personally checked every repair in the building. Robert Collins had made a full recovery and returned to the restaurant for a special dinner. "The doctor said without your immediate response, I wouldn't be here," he told Mike, gripping his hand. "You've given me more years with my grandchildren." The Veteran Support Alliance had featured Mike's story in their newsletter, highlighting the often overlooked medical skills of military veterans in civilian jobs. 5 local restaurants had since hired veterans in visible roles, and a community college had launched a program specifically designed to help veterans translate their military medical training into civilian certifications. Greg had been reassigned to the restaurant's sister location across town, a demotion that many felt was deserved, but that Mike had actually argued against. Everyone deserved a chance to learn and grow from mistakes, he'd told Mr. Vaughn. The incident had revealed more than just Mike's hidden skills. It had exposed how easily society overlooks the depth and value of those who served. Each veteran carries experiences and training that civilian life rarely calls upon, until moment of crisis reveal what has been there all along. How many Mike Wilsons walk among us? Colonel Harrington asked during a community forum organized after the incident, how many heroes are cleaning our floors, driving our buses, or working in our warehouses? Their extraordinary skills and experience invisible until tragedy strikes. As for Mike, he continues to approach each day with the same quiet competence. The only difference is that now, when he walks to the Silver Oak, people look him in the eye. "Have you ever wondered," he asked during a staff safety training, "how many heroes you pass every day without knowing it? Sometimes all it takes is one moment to reveal them." This story reminds us all of an essential truth. Respect isn't earned by titles or uniforms, but by character and actions. In your community right now, there are likely veterans whose invaluable skills go unrecognized. The next time you meet someone in a service position, remember Mike Wilson. Share in the comments if you've ever encountered someone whose hidden talents or background surprised you. And if you know a veteran, take a moment today to acknowledge their service, not just for what they did in uniform, but for the extraordinary capabilities they carry with them every day.